we're simple people. We need to be told. But I think to a certain extent it is correct, but then it isn't, and I'm going to explain that to you. You should be aware of the fact that when your spouse is not happy, there's this certain characteristics, there's certain things projected on their faces or the way they are, than when you know when somebody's happy or not. And if you're not picking those signs up, vice versa, then there's an issue because you're just lying to yourself. We all see them. So if your wife's not happy for whatever reason, you should know, you should sense that. Now, there are people out there who don't sense that, and I think they're the ones when it all explodes out to them, and then you're thinking, where did that come from? It's because the signs were there. So if somebody says to you, if your partner said to you, don't do this, and you continuously do it, then that festers in them. And then that leads to another thing, And then they may have had a bad day at work, then they've seen you doing that, and then it just comes out like an avalanche. But what I'm trying to say here is you should pick those signs up. And every situation, every couple are different. You should really have those honest conversations. You should take those breaks when you need to take those breaks. You should go for those drives when you need to go for those drives. You should go on those holidays. I think that's the problem. We always leave it to another day. We'll leave it for the next day. No, deal with it now. Tomorrow's not promised. The past is gone. What you have is the present. Live for the present. And with the stigma attached to it, I'll add to it. I think 20 years ago was a massive stigma. If you were in a marriage, you were told you need to stick it through thick and thin. And that caused a lot of emotional damage to a lot of families. And I've known people who have been in relationships where they weren't happy to be in. And it ruined them to the point where when you look at them now, you think, my God, 20 years of your life is just wasted. And you were in that relationship. And granted, they've got kids, but you can see the kids have not been happy because they've seen father and mother arguing amongst themselves. And that's really impacted the children. But I think in this day and age, if you're not happy, you're brave enough to say, I'm severing ties, I'm going to walk away from it. So I think a lot of families over time have accepted the fact that if marriages don't work, you need to sever ties because your mental health is at risk. And you're at risk of losing your child because your child might say, Mum, Dad, you're not listening to me. I don't want to be married. I'm moving out. I don't care what happens. And then they go into a totally different space. So I think things have progressed.
Why was there that stigma?
I think it's down.
Let's say 20 years ago, I would counter that and say that stigma still exists. Like I can talk about people's experiences that I know over the last 10 years where when they have got divorced, the family have actually shunned them and said, well, actually, almost like an act of shame. Like if they'd actually been arrested for a crime, they probably would have got more support than actually getting divorced. And it's actually that inconsistent approach. Why is there such a negative response?
Well, what I've realised is also, and it's all going to underpin what I'm saying, is I think 20 years ago when you got married, or 25 years ago, it was almost like your spouses were picked for you in terms of arranged marriages. So it was not just the husband and wife. So, your family might say, we've found this suitable person for you, daughter, or husband, the son, and we think that you should get married. And in those days, 20, 25, 30 years ago, it was just a norm. You just agreed to what they said. You got to know the family. You met the family. You knew who they were. They weren't just somebody out of your own social network, but you got married to them, and that was fine. And if things were going wrong, then it was almost like you have to make things work. Families got involved. You had your ups and your downs, and if it was at that point of breaking point, then families again will get involved. And it was almost like said to the girl or the husband, you deal with it. You made your bed now. We made your bed. You need to lie in it. You cannot walk away from this. You'll bring shame to us. And now I think, granted, slowly, that has diminished because a lot of people now are choosing their own spouses for themselves. They are actually going out. And that could be a topic for discussion for marriage, or how people were arranged marriages was massive. Now it's more considered as being love marriages, which I still find very weird, that concept, why you would make love marriage as being a really bad thing. But I think it's become the norm now, where you would pick your spouse and you would bring your message home and you say, Mum, Dad, I found somebody, and families would get together. But if those marriages broke, then it's almost like you picked your own partner, it didn't work out, we weren't happy with you doing it, but we had to accept it. Now that you've separated, you go. But I think it comes down to, personally, is where you've been raised and where your family come from. Now, my family come from Lahore. Granted, we're still Pakistanis and we still have our cultural deep-rooted. But I think our way of thinking may be different to somebody, for instance, from the village of certain remote parts of Pakistan, where it's almost, I could be wrong in saying that, but I'm only speaking first-hand experience. So if somebody in my family decided to get divorced or were divorced, yeah, it's bad. But we're always thinking, we've got a daughter back, we've got a son back. We'd rather have a son back who's unhappy, a daughter who's unhappy, and build them up again than say, here you go, we're shunning you. And I feel so sorry for those who have been shunned, because I think when you are being shunned and you're on your own and you are divorced, it's a very lonely place to be. I've got friends who have been left and they had to build up their own environment again. Sorry about the noise, there's something going in the background. But yeah, if they've been shunned, it's just been an awful experience to see them go through struggles, raising the children if they are going to children. And you know what? The sad thing is when families come back after 20 years and say, can you come back? I want to see my grandchildren. Then it's up to the person that's been shunned whether they've got the bigger heart to say, okay. And some have got the right to say, well, I don't want you to meet my kids no more. When I needed you the most, you weren't there. Now you want to come back when I've gone through the difficult period and now they're as high as me, shoulder-wise, in terms of height, you want to know them. Because the grandchildren don't want to know the people because your family is going through the difficult period. I've gone through that.
But let's drill down on that, because your perspective there is correct. That obviously there's a geographical element, that one region, if you come from one particular background or one region, your thoughts may be different to another. So you've given us the Punjabian experience and context. Abdurrahman, from the neck of the woods that your family originate, did you have much experience of hearing about divorce? Because I know from a Kashmiri perspective, I can't remember anybody getting divorced. I remember many of families, you're thinking, oh my days, what on earth's going on here? They're struggling. The parents are unhappy. The grandparents are unhappy. The kids are unhappy. And you could see the chain reaction that toxic environment was creating. But they all just stuck with it. And then, but those individuals are now elders, and we're talking in the 80s and 90s. The kids are growing up. But again, it impacts on how those individuals are now with their partners, because they've grown up in households where there has been a lot of friction and a lot of communication hasn't been a positive approach. So what was your experience growing up? Did you see elders in the community that were struggling, and you reflected that maybe divorce was an option? Did you hear people talking about divorce? I can't remember divorce ever being mentioned.
So it's an interesting question. I mean, again, I can only talk about it from not necessarily first-hand experience, but my own kind of life experience growing up. Obviously, as a second generation Asian, is it second generation Asian? I think we are.
I think we are. Yeah.
You kind of grew up in that household where the elders, the first generation immigrants, kind of came into this country, and obviously they brought us up the way that they did. But I have to admit, there was a certain strength in their particular relationships, right? In the way that they carried themselves, in the way that they kind of portrayed their particular relationships. So I don't think I observed anything unusual in any of the relationships, whether that was my immediate family or extended relatives. They were just very, very good. I mean, it's not to say that those problems didn't occur within the relationship, but they were very good at masking them, right? So there was always this emphasis on strong family ties, strong family unit, strong relative unit as well. And that was always there for as long as I can remember, really. But then there was also this kind of great emphasis, right? That even if things are going or more kind of challenging under the hood, you're still going to make it work somehow. So there was that emphasis on just keeping things together for the sake of the family, for the sake of children and things like that. And it kind of goes back to what Hassan was talking about, relationships, right? It's not just having a relationship, it's having a quality relationship. And that can be influenced by many different things. So I think that quality certainly needs to be there. But there's another advantage, isn't there, to having a strong family unit. So for example, the family nucleus consisting of a mother and father and children, and the children who perceive that family unit to be relatively stable. And how do you do that? Because mum and dad don't usually argue, for example, and if they have any personal problems, they will talk about it away from me, and I don't get to see it. That means the child still grows up thinking, actually, I'm growing up in a relatively stable family. And I think there's a lot of advantages to that as a child versus constantly seeing your parents bickering, and then that eventually ending up in divorce, and you witnessing that, and then that influencing pretty much the rest of your life in some way, consciously or unconsciously. So yes, I think maybe some of our elders kind of kept it together because they had to, but there was also some advantages to keeping it together for the offspring that followed.
True. I mean, adding to that point, I think when you are in that position, when you do decide to get married, and it's a happy occasion. You've got all your friends and family with you. You have all these plans, I'm going to wear this type of clothes, this venue. It's a magical experience for those who have been married, and you're in that space of just wanting everything to work, and it's a fairy tale thing. You want the marriage, you want to have 2.4 children, have a house, go on holidays. You have that dream. But when things do go wrong, I've realised one thing, and I've known a lot of people who go through it. sometimes you know that affection you have for your partner starts to fizzle away for some reason, and a lot of people might think that, well, what do you mean it fizzles away? It just happens. You just don't feel in that space no more with that person. You grow apart. And now I'm bringing that into the conversation as well, because I've got friends who have been together for 15 years. They got married eventually, and it just disintegrated.